Greetings, system failure listeners. Nate here and Brian over there. How are you doing this week, Brian? I'll just interject it. I'll just add that it's been quite a while since I've last seen you. I don't usually go 11, 12, 13 days without seeing you, but that's what's happened because you've been out on the left coast for business purposes, eh?
Yeah, well, before we get to that, I guess how I am today is we're effed because I see you downloaded 10 podcast clips.
Okay, all right. So, yes, I did.
Me and the listeners.
Yes, I am planning to belabor both you and the listeners' ear with no fewer than 10 podcast clips from the recent Tucker Carlson interview with the inimitable Charlie Kirk. But, in my defense, they got on to talking about debt jubilees towards the end, and it was just red meat for the System Failure podcast. Good news. Almost all these clips are much shorter than my conventional clips. I'm trying to go with, 30, 60, 90 seconds instead of 2 and 3 minutes, 4 minutes. So
we'll see how long the clips are.
Well, I think that they will titillate. By the end of this podcast, you'll be so excited about these clips that you'll have forgotten this criticism and be over the moon. That is my prediction.
All right, a bold prediction. We'll see how it plays out.
Okay, well, tell us, how was Los Angeles? Obviously, Los Angeles is an interesting place, someplace I'd like to actually visit versus just going through LAX airports to get to other destinations. It's a part of, can you really grapple or reckon with America and American culture if you've not quaffed and imbibed the Los Angeles culture? But on the other hand, the place is obnoxious from a traffic standpoint, from a logistics standpoint, from an administrative standpoint. So I wonder what you think, having been out there, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, basically all those things are true. Let's see. Well, so the drive from LAX to kind of downtown LA to the hotel that we were staying at, the Hilton Checkers. It was a ride through I don't know, the Damned. Yeah, it was not encouraging like the neighborhoods we drove through on the way. And then the Hilton Checkers, it is right across from the U.S. Bank building, which you may recall getting exploded in Independence Day.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, I looked you up on Google Maps at some point, and you looked like you were in the north part of the downtown area, Los Angeles.
Yeah, so the downtown part was pretty cool. They only charge... It's like $9.50 for a burrito bowl at Chipotle, or it's like $11.50 is the base price over here. Although I didn't actually eat at the Chipotle, but I did notice that.
Yeah, that was. Do you remember when we went down to see David Gilmour last November?
I do.
And we were eating out in Hoboken, New Jersey, and we're like, the prices are half what they are in Portland, Maine. This is crazy.
Oh well, yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like similar sort of thing happened in Los Angeles. Is that what you're saying?
Man, there's a lot of overpriced things. There's a lot of expensive restaurants, but also the Chipotle is cheaper. I mean, food is just of better quality, and I think largely cheaper in Los Angeles. Although there are a lot of expensive restaurants and whatnot.
So you're thinking just the burrito market was advantageous, not the entire food scene.
Well, I think that food in the Northeast here is expensive relative to anywhere else. But then there's just something about, the Los Angeles demographic is appeals to a higher income, and so the restaurants do tend to charge more. But in general, the food is fresher and of higher quality and probably cheaper.
I see. All right. Well, it does seem like they have their full complement of Latino culture in Los Angeles, versus up here in Maine, we only just got a few Latinos recently, so our burritos are often subpar compared to what you might find in a state like Florida, where I lived for 8 years. So it's always good to have vibrant communities where you can get the delicious foods and steal all the best recipes from everyone's different culture.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so let's see. Well, how was it down there? Well, I won the company karaoke competition.
Wow, which song did you go with? Which Pink Floyd number did you belt out?
Well, I sang "It's Gonna Be Me" by NSYNC.
All right. Well, that's an odd departure from your normally monolithic Pink Floyd musical tastes, but I think that's a good one for the karaoke. You got to be the Pink Floyd is just not a good, strong karaoke choice.
It's not.
Even if you could pull it off, it would be depressing. So it would be maybe not the thing you want for the karaoke crowd.
I mean, you could maybe have a cigar if you're a Pink Floyd devotee, but there still is going to be a lengthy guitar solo at the end where you have to stand around.
Yeah. It's something more in the vein of bubblegum pop, like NSYNC. Definitely what the doctor ordered.
Yeah, so that was cool. Well, we did, it was basically this, conference sort of workshop thing for 2 days, and then we had kind of half a day on Thursday to do stuff. So we did one of these crazy, celebrity home sighting tours. They take you up like Mulholland Drive and drive you through the hills and whatnot, and you see like Tom Cruise's place and the guy from Face Off.
There's Cage and
Nicolas Cage.
Oh, yeah. And Travolta's the other guy in Face Off.
Someone waved to us at Nicolas Cage's house, and I threw him the peace sign, but I don't think it was Nicolas Cage. Maybe it was his son or something. But yeah, I don't know. Like we drove around the traffic on 101, and I don't know, a lot of we also the tour like went over to like Rodeo Drive. There's like 3 Louis Vuitton stores on Rodeo Drive. It's pretty crazy.
Rodeo Drive makes me think of the Mighty Ducks too. Remember when the Mighty Ducks hockey team visited Los Angeles for this hockey tournament? They went to Rodeo Drive. Remember one of the hockey players was like a cowboy who got 2 minutes of roping in the final game. He lassoed one of the other players. But anyway, he thought it was Rodeo Drive. I always thought that was hilarious. So yeah, that's what I think of when I think of Rodeo Drive.
That's a good callback.
Most people would think of like Pretty Woman or some of these other movies filmed there, but my mind goes to D2.
And then I like on Friday morning, I just had some time to kill, and I went and got a $20 smoothie at the Erewhon, which is kind of like a Whole Foods but more expensive in Uppity. And yeah, I got this like orange mango smoothie that had lion's mane and collagen in it. So I mean, I don't know, I guess it was pretty good, but it's hard to imagine spending $20 on a smoothie regularly.
What was your overall vibe? Like you get like when you go into different cities, like you get the different vibes of the city. Like for example, in Budapest, people seemed very uptight and tense. Whereas in Prague, people were much more bohemian, very much more like hippie, laid back man kind of vibe. How could you, if you had to oversimplify the entire Los Angeles experience into like a vibe like that, how would you articulate it?
Well, one thing is that like Los Angeles is like the first place I visited that has more homeless people than Portland. So there's that.
So we're not as bad as LA. I'm glad to hear that.
The Hilton Checkers, does have kind of like a rooftop mezzanine patio thing that you can hang out on. And, it gives you a good view of the U.S. Bank building. And, also, though, it was nighttime. And, there was like 3 helicopters with this searchlights out trying to, track down this car. Someone managed to find it on Facebook. So like that was going on.
Like a car, there was 3 helicopters searching for like a car.
Yeah,
like
there was some kind of police chase going on.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So that happened. So anyway, the vibe out there, yeah, I mean, it's like the Manson murders happened out there basically. It's all like lingering in the ether. And System of a Down has this song called, Don't Get Lost in Hollywood. And with lyrics like, you're the biggest fish they've ever seen or something like that. And anyway, yeah, I would say stay away.
System of a Down, they're all from the Armenian community in Los Angeles, if I'm not mistaken, aren't they Armenian? Yeah. Isn't that their thing? And their big album, it said System of a Down, but like the Hollywood sign that used to say Hollywood Land back in the day now just says Hollywood was System of a Down. So yeah, that's an interesting connection there. Well, I mean, are you eager to go back to Los Angeles, or is it a place, or is it a godforsaken place you hope you'll never be, forced to return to?
It was like a fun visit. I don't think I'd want to live there.
Yeah. A lot of people obviously moved out of Los Angeles during the COVID era. And I've listened to the Corolla podcast for 10 or 15 years, and that guy's always complaining about Los Angeles just getting worse and worse and worse. But it's also this place that's like critical, that's pivotal to the, as I already said, identity of America, or what America is, or something like that. So it's a weird kind of juxtaposition, this city of angels. So yeah, interesting place anyway. It sounds like you had quite a week out there.
It was a fine adventure.
Well, things have been pretty quiet back here in Maine. Not a lot of excitement on my side of the scoreboard, but we do have your birthday coming up here, so we have all kinds of family events littering the month of August. I guess all kinds of family events. There's some, the lovely Tracy has some family events too. So mix that with our not family events, and you get quite a cocktail. But we had some really cool weather, which was interesting. Like the dog days of summer are usually oppressive and without relent. But we just had a couple of days where it was like upper 60s and lower 70s. It was unbelievable. I understand that's the weather in Los Angeles all the time, right? What was the temp what was the temp like out there when you were there?
Yeah, it was mostly like 70 degrees, which is pretty wild in the summer with the palm trees. It seems like it would be hotter, but it's not.
Yeah,
it is super hazy like every morning too, but then it burns off in the afternoon.
Florida had palm trees, and it was just like March through October every year. It was just, well, let's say April through October every year. It was just scorching heat. By the time you get to the end of April, it was on. So I associate palm trees with extreme tropical heat. And so it's interesting hearing of palm trees in a more temperate environment or a more temperate climate. That's why that's the legendary weather of SoCal that everyone talks about. That's so lovely, and that we have the opposite of here with our extreme swings in the seasons.
All right. Well, anyway, how's your faith in the system going on? Or, well, to turn it to the topic of politics, I mean, I see that like the Epstein issue is now the one that the Democrats are going to use against the Donald, which I think is hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's we had some. Let's see, was it last pod or maybe 2 pods ago where you were very disappointed that Donald was now going to participate in the cover-up of the Epstein files versus being the agent who releases them. The agent of change who releases them. But it's great to see first of all, I mean, well, it's a losing thing for the Democrats. They also have covered up the Epstein files. All their politicians are also compromised. But I mean, it's so difficult to go on a place like Reddit because there's so many people that are just confidently incorrect or trying to get the working anytime if you have this opinion that pits you against other members of the working class, you got to be really critical about where these ideas come from. Right? We're going to get to some of this in the second half of the show when we hear from Mr. Tucker Carlson, but blaming the boomers or blaming immigrants or blaming anyone that's not the rich, right? Blaming anything that's not a class analysis for what's going on is always a suspect enterprise to be engaged in, and
it's fraught.
It's fraught. Yes, Reddit is particularly fraught. It's just this echo chamber, and it's amazing to see they prop up these echo chambers, and then whenever there's a reckoning point, like an election, like the 2024 election, you can just see how the people on Reddit had no way of seeing it coming because they're trapped in this echo chamber. But seeing people spam information about the Epstein onto every single post and trying to inject Epstein into every single conversation is hilarious. I mean, for once, the obnoxious Reddit echo chamber where people are either dupes themselves or have programmed bots to just flood Reddit with these asinine opinions. For once, that's working in our favor because it's blowing oxygen onto the Epstein thing, which is, like you're saying, hilarious.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Democrats were the ones covering up the Epstein thing, but that was 4 years ago. And so, I mean, it seems like the sentiment online is to just try to forget about that because that's not going on right now.
I mean, Joe Biden was president January 15th, 2025. It hasn't been that long since they were covering up the Epstein thing.
Well, it's not happening right now.
Yeah, so we can easily, so we can forget all about that and just pretend like the Donald is the chief reprobate in the Epstein story, which is fine. I think that's great.
We'll talk about kayfabe. It's just absolutely crazy the way they're just gonna switch the roles around. It's like John Cena's playing the heel right now in the WWE, where he was the good guy for 20 years.
Man, Hollywood Hulk Hogan was sitting right there. Man passed away a couple days ago in his living room down there in Tampa. Right there for the taking, but the heel turn of Hulk Hogan has got to be the great example for this week, right? We can we'll use John Cena for next week.
Sure. And Hulk Hogan just died, unfortunately.
Yeah, R.I.P. to the Hulkster. And so the story is that Hulk Hogan was this roided up wrestling hero of the 80s, but then in the 90s during the NWO era, he put on a black bandana and became the evil Hollywood Hulk Hogan. Have I got that about right, Brian? I feel like you know more about wrestling than I do.
Yes. Although I think for a long time it would be him against the Randy Macho Man Savage, and I think they would both kind of do heel turns and go against each other. But certainly the grand heel turn arc was when he dyed his beard black, but then had the bleached mustache.
Yep, that's right. I remember.
And wore those NWO shirts.
He he must not be a blonde dude, right? He must be dyeing his. He must have just only dyed his mustache. I'm just guessing, right? He can't. He must have bleached his hair all those years, right? He's not like a. I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Well, the beard, I don't know, it looked colored to me, but I don't know. Maybe not.
Right. I don't know. Well, I guess that mystery will have to remain forever a mystery with the Hulkster passing on. But yeah, it does seem like this Epstein thing, or the layers of kayfabe, like you're saying, like layers of reality and layers of kayfabe. For those not in the know, kayfabe is the wrestling term for fakery. You know, when they introduced the elements of wrestling that are determined beforehand, that aren't an actual competition, right? The scripted parts are kayfabe. Yeah.
Well, I'd be more excited about it all if I didn't think the story was just going to be ultimately squashed. It's a valiant effort, though, to keep it, to try to get some resolution here. But there's just no way. I mean, the fact that like the Democrats are complicit in trying to release the files is like your surest sign that it's like not going to happen because they can't do that. It's going to bring down their whole establishment.
Yeah, there's something about the Epstein files that's untouchable, no matter who you are. In the last podcast, we were speculating that maybe there's like some kind of a magic involved. Jokingly, maybe Epstein summoned a portal or summoned like the devil or something like that, and so they can't show the security footage of that. It'll blow up everyone's reality, Or another more serious example is the national debt. Right? Obviously, we have a debt-based currency, and so every time we create currency, we also create dollars of currency and then dollars of debt. And so the only way to pay off the debt is to create more currency tomorrow to pay off the debt you incurred today. So the national debt, right, is really the count of all the dollars that the government created but then didn't tax back out of existence. And so the idea that you should run a balanced budget, right, it doesn't make any sense at all. So if you're Thomas Massey, who like seems to me to be like this honest dude, if you're Thomas Massey, what do you do when you get in power and your age? You're like, oh yeah, well, we can't balance the budget. It'll just completely destroy society. You're like, oh, I ran on balancing the budget. Now I'm in this weird spot. So interesting to see the Donald, like he has been brushing scandals off. Like that guy was getting mugshotted and lawfared into oblivion, had lost the 2020 election. I mean, that guy was down bad if anyone ever was, and managed to come all the way back and win the 2020 election. No matter how many lewd comments, no matter how much he talks about wanting to date his daughter or sneaking into the dressing room of the Miss America's pageant, he straight up will say, I could gun someone down on Fifth Avenue and still win the election. But there's one thing that the Donald can't negotiate. Even the Donald, the great P.T. Barnum, carnival barker, there's one thing that even the Donald has to try. He can't brush off, right? No matter how much he tries. And it's the Epstein thing. And it's the one thing that the Democrats are deathly afraid to talk about, which is a beautiful and juicy piece of irony, despite the fools on Reddit, right? I mean, the Democratic establishment is fully implicated in these files, right? There's no way that they can allow more knowledge of what's going on. Obviously, right, there's some kind of a political blackmail operation, very likely involving foreign intelligence agencies. And so that really means that whether you're the Donald or Bill Clinton, you cannot afford to have this information come out. It will destroy people's conception of the state that they believe they lived in heretofore. That's what I think is going on. And so it's just untouchable. And so it's just really gratifying. Like I already expressed gratitude for the aforementioned fools on Reddit for just blowing oxygen on this fire, keeping it going, because it's great to see. The Donald's not going to get a break, right? They're not. He's still, even though he keeps trying to be like, all right, case closed, we're going to talk about the many crimes of Barack Obama instead. No matter how much he does that, people still talk about the Epstein files. So I am excited. I think it's great. It was depressing when the Donald, like I shared your depression when the Donald first had to break the news to us all that he wasn't going to be doing anything to actually drain any swamps. At least vis-a-vis the Epstein files. And it's just been great to see them the couple weeks since then. The bonfire is still raging. It shows no sign of going out. Great stuff.
Well, I mean, the Epstein files are like a simulacrum maybe for the whole deep state issue, right?
Yes. Yeah. It will, that's my prediction. It will expose that the nominal heads of the people we think are leading us they're just a lower tier PR arrangement, and that the real structures of power have long been beyond any sort of democratic control whatsoever.
Well, my feeling is that the reason why the Donald could basically do whatever he wanted and get away with it is because they believed that he would take on the deep state in some way. And now that it's apparent that that's not the case, and now the QAnon shaman is out on Donald Trump,
Is that really is that really true? Like,
yeah,
all right.
he
I thought
called
you were
him
saying
like a
figuratively.
chump or something, or he said something disparaging about the Donald.
Oh man, if you've lost even the support of the QAnon shaman, you know you strayed far afield if you're the Donald, eh?
Yeah, like maniacs from the internet wearing Viking helmets. That was the Donald's prime demographic, and now he's lost that. And yeah, it's really crazy. It's just so funny that the Democrats here are going to be like, wait a minute. It's like the Spider-Man meme. A bunch of people pointing at each other. Like, it's just unbelievable.
Well, if the Donald is not going to be the witting drainer of the swamp, then I suppose it should be appropriate. Maybe he could become the unwitting drainer of the swamp through all this Epstein nonsense.
There is a question. It kind of alludes to something you were saying before about like Thomas Massey, where if you become elected as a politician, should you try to... Yeah, because your choices are to either slow down the apocalypse, right? Or to make the apocalypse happen quicker. And so if you slow down the apocalypse, I mean, well, that's kind of good in the present moment. But then if we pursue the apocalypse, then we can kind of get to the next thing, but we have to go through the apocalypse. Yeah. So it's a real conundrum from a political standpoint, I think, what you're supposed to do.
What you're saying really strikes me as the core of the concept of the alchemical journey, right? You have to willingly descend into the inferno in order to have any hope of climbing out the other side, ascending Mount Purgatory, and then finally stepping off the peak of Mount Purgatory into the celestial spheres of paradise. In other words, yeah, it's like it's always a question of, do you rip the Band-Aid off? That's just a recurring theme in life. Do I take a little bit of pain now or a lot of pain later? And what is the name of the comedian who had the old bit, like the 70s comedian guy that like died from too much coke or something like that? Who was it? Who had the big joke about you get elected president and they bring you into the smoky conference room and show you a shot of the JFK assassination for a never before seen angle?
Is it Dan Carlin?
I don't think it's Carlin. It's
Dan Carlin's the podcaster. George Carlin.
George Carlin. Yeah, I'm sorry. You said Dan Carlin. I was thinking George Carlin, but it's not George Carlin either. One of these other guys. Well, I forgot the name, but I wish I could attribute to the person whose imagination came up with that hilarious vignette, but I'll still invoke it anyway. It is interesting to see you get elected. There's this weird disconnect between people's conception of reality and then the reality that they actually live in. And that's, of course, the preoccupation of this whole system failure constellation of ideas.
I know which comedian you mean now. Joe Rogan loves that guy. Bill Hicks, that's who it is.
Oh, thank you. Yes, Bill Hicks. Of course it's Bill Hicks. Yeah. Well, there's a disconnect between like the reality people think that they live in, and then and then when you get elected and you get put into that smoky room, like the actual like if you are elected representative, you're now kind of bridging the gap between the reality people expect to be living in and then the actual reality the ruling class has imposed on them without their knowledge. And so there's this huge chasm there, and so it's got to be really strange. And obviously that's what the Donald is dealing with, at this very moment. It's got to be very strange to have to it's like the blanket that's not big enough for the bed. No matter how much you stretch it and pull it, it's never big enough. Either your feet or your chest is cold, and that's there's just a reality that would enrage people if they thought they were contributing taxes to this reality. And then there's the reality that they've been bamboozled into believing they live to get them to give up their tax money without a fight. And so quite a bit of daylight between those two realities. It's got to be really uncomfortable to be in the position of representing this horrific true reality and trying to paper over it with this fake veneer of whatever it is people believe they were living in. So
I like the sheet metaphor. That's good.
What the kid what's the name of Dr. House's assistant there?
Chase Foreman,
his friend who plays
the guy from
the Dead Poet Society guy. That's the one I'm trying to think of. He has that simile in the Dead Poet Society. What is the name of? Dr. Sherlock Holmes has an assistant who's his assistant is named what? What's the name of his assistant?
Watson.
Okay, and so Dr. House is based on Sherlock Holmes. He's Dr. H, and then his assistant has a W name also. I can't remember. Played by the same Michael Scott Leonard, Sean Scott, whatever the guy's name is. But yeah, we are really swinging and missing on our references today, Brian. Whether it's John Cena or trying to figure out, trying to remember the name of Bill Hicks, or whether it's this, boy, it is just hard to come up with a reference. The old brain is not functioning on all cylinders this morning. And I think, full disclosure, the issue is that we waited 10 minutes to have our coffee. We, settled in with the coffee a little later than we usually do. So maybe that's why I can't remember any references.
James Wilson, that's his assistant.
Dr. Wilson, yes, thank you. That is the analog for Dr. Watson, and the actor that plays Dr. Wilson has this dialogue about the blanket stretching and whatnot.
Well, really, I think the Cena heel turn is really like a great example. If you've watched any of the clips, he's he goes up on stage and he's like, "I pay for all your mortgages." It's like the dumbest ish imaginable, basically, that he says
to the crowd.
Yeah, it's like
he pays their mortgages. In what sense? They pay him, right? Isn't that how it works?
Well, yeah, it's like unbelievably stupid.
Okay, I'll just have to take that at face value.
He goes up for the mic and talks for 40 minutes, saying stuff like that about you never liked me. It's just the most brazenly transparent heel turn ever. It's unbelievable. Well, it's unbelievably it's just really hard to watch.
See, the effective. So now I'm thinking of the CM Punk heel turn where he takes the mic and breaks the fourth wall. And I only know about this heel turn because it's featured in one of those videos from Frame Problems, the YouTube channel. The guy, whoever it is, guy or gal behind Frame Problems, the YouTube channel, makes some great videos introducing the ideas of Dr. Eric Weinstein. And he has, or she has, in one of those first videos, the footage of CM Punk, the wrestler, turning on the crowd, but he has actual things to say that seem real. It's the layering of kayfabe with reality that makes it so effective, because you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. So if John Cena's announcing that he's paying my mortgage, I'm like, my man, I paid $150 for these tickets. I feel like the cash is flowing in the other direction. It's a less effective, He's like, I raised your kids, stuff like that. It's absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, and CM Punk famously got his mic turned off because he seemed to be calling out the system, although it was unclear if that was actually scripted within the system, in a great kayfabe moment. So that is a classic one. Yeah, it's the insidious layering that just really becomes confusing. And that's what the Donald has been. That's what I think that the Donald is so skilled at, layering reality with fakery in such a way as to be advantageous to him. It's his main skill, and he's darn good at it. Well, Brian, I feel like we should put a bow on this, on the first half of the podcast, take a little break for ourselves, and come back from the second podcast, because, as mentioned, I'm guilty of clipping no fewer than 10 little clips from the recent Charlie Kirk episode of Tucker Carlson. So what do you say? Shall we take a little break, come back, and dive into those clips?
We'll get ready for this arduous slog through 10 clips.
All righty, we'll see you all in just a second. And we're back. All right. Well, Brian, while you were away in Los Angeles, our main man, see what I've done there? Our main man, Tucker Carlson, because he records up here in Maine. See how it works?
Double entendre.
Yeah. He had the evangelical, hardcore conservative Donald supporter Charlie Kirk up on his pod up here to Bryant Pond, Maine this past week. And their conversation revolved around debt. I couldn't believe it when I saw the thing pop up. I was like, wait, what? Charlie Kirk, the evangelical man, wants to talk about debt?
And Charlie Kirk is the guy who hosted that debate between Dave Smith and that Zionist, right?
The Zionist. Which one? Recently, Dave Smith went to a Turning Points USA event hosted by Charlie Kirk in Florida, talking about the Epstein thing. That was in the past couple of weeks. And I think, but then there's Patrick Bet-David, also based out of Florida, Miami. Yeah,
not him.
Not him. Okay, so it's, but that was not.
I thought I was debating, some guy about whether Israel is beneficial for foreign policy. He was debating.
Oh, okay. Yes. I know now the debate you're talking about. I didn't watch it. I believe that you're quite right. I believe that it is Turning Point USA, though. I think that was Turning Points USA, which is Charlie Kirk's organization.
Yeah. All right. You didn't watch this debate?
I guess not. I still. I should go back and watch it. I do love a good Dave Smith debate.
I mean, Dave Smith is definitely the spiritual successor of Chris Hitchens, just going out there and dunking on people. Especially, this is much more relevant, although I guess Chris Hitchens' thing was relevant back then.
Yeah, man, I see Smith as in the direct opposite of Hitch. Carry on.
What do you mean? He definitely goes and dunks on people.
Yeah. Well, there's the Hitch slaps, but Hitch is more like I picture Hitch as more like Douglas Murray, right? The erudite boarding school with the erudite graduate of the British boarding school system, possibly with a cheeky spot of homosexuality, mixed in there. That's part of going to these British boarding schools, and arguing for things like the Iraq War. Right? This is Hitch supporting the Iraq War, whereas I feel like Dave would be on the other side. But I agree with you in terms of clips and Hitch slaps. Right? There's this thing where I just think Dave Smith is just working with the truth, and so he doesn't have a political axe to grind. He's not financially supported by someone who has a...
One thing about, like, Dave Smith is always going on Piers Morgan, and Piers Morgan is always having 2 or 3 guests on, or maybe more, and they have to, like, shout each other down. Mm-hmm. And there is something to where, like, in the war of ideas, it's not good enough to just be able to win, like, a conversation. Like, I don't know, your idea has to be good enough to, like, go to war with, basically, which is what happens on Piers Morgan. And Dave Smith is kind of equipped to do that. Yeah. So it's more than just that he has... I mean, I guess he does have the truth on his side, the shining light of justice, which helps, I suppose. But you also need to be able to go in there and go to war with people, right?
Yeah. And this is something... You're right. This is a good comparison. Hitch was really good at going on CNN and just owning people in a short period of time. And Dave Smith also possesses that talent. So this is a good comparison to make there. Yeah. Well, okay, so we've got Charlie Kirk. He's on Tucker Carlson's pod, and the man is talking about, like, Gen Z being the most indebted generation, of all time.
It's a relatable topic, huh?
Yeah, and it's like it's wild. Like, the thing, we'll get to the clips here, but like the thing that's really funny to hear this man, he over and over, you're going to hear 3 or 4 times in these clips, Charlie Kirk saying, "I got no solutions. I'm not a solutions man." They keep mentioning Marxism. Like, they're like, well, we don't want to be Marxist, but we have this problem. And if we talk about it, people will think we're Marxists. You'll hear those kind of comments, right? Charlie Kirk is a man who's an evangelical. And as you will hear in our last clip number 10, he's a man who's fully aware of the periodic debt jubilees commanded by the Bible, right? He probably doesn't understand the Hudsonian trick of language about not, like the thing, St. Augustine's great innovation was making Christianity not about forgiving people's debts, but forgiving people's sins. It was a much more lucrative proposition for the Roman oligarchy, who might have been compelled to forgive debts owed to them under the original interpretation of Christianity, according to the eminent Dr. Michael Hudson, but who, under Augustine's interpretation of Christianity, could collect money from the poor for their sins. Eventually that's what the scam turned into, collecting money from people to buy God's forgiveness for them from their sins, to shorten their sentence in purgatory.
It's quite the sleight of hand trick, huh?
St. Augustine was a hugely pivotal figure for that reason. That's a major transformation. So anyway, Charlie Kirk, he's aware of some of these layers of debt forgiveness history that are in his own faith that he's like, but he's a conservative, and so is Tucker, and so it's very interesting to hear them like correctly diagnosing the problem here, but being utterly no way to propose any kind of a solution. So let's dive into it, Brian. If we could, Charlie Kirk is going to set the stage here. I've clipped this to where he's starting halfway through his sentence. He's setting the table, setting the stage, talking about why young people voted for the Donald. So just keep in mind, he's talking about young people voting for the Donald here as we dive off the diving board.
The reasons he was able to win younger voters and younger men, especially in big numbers, is that they were trying to get their leaders' attention. They said, hey, this guy, Donald Trump, he is pledging to go fix our economic anxiety. He is loud. He is going to get your attention. Donald Trump was a distress signal by a lot of young people, especially young men, that were stuck in a credit-centric renter economy. And again, this is what is the rise of Mom Donnie. It's just another iteration of this, only from the left, which is
a credit-centric renter economy.
Yes, which is the way that we need to focus, that we need to kind of frame this. And conservatives, I think I know why, are just so unwilling to have this conversation. And I'm not even going to get into what we should do about it. I think I have some good ideas. And trust me, I'm not a socialist. I'm a market guy. I like capitalism. I think markets are good. I think entrepreneurship is good. But we need to kind of paint this picture first, because I know this for certain. So many people in DC have no idea what I'm talking about when I bring this up to them. And secondly, a lot of people over 50 think this is a foreign concept, and they think, quite honestly, this is just the complaining of young people that don't want to work. So let me kind of paint this picture. It is harder than ever to own a home. We know this, but how much harder? Back when my parents had to go own a home, the price of a home...
How old are your parents?
They're early 70s,
Yep.
so late 60s, early 70s. So baby boomers.
Yeah.
And great parents, by the way, phenomenal upbringing, great values. So back when they wanted to go buy a home in their beginning income years, 1970s, 1980s, home prices were on average about 3 times the average income in America. They are now 7 times the average income in America. Rents have gone up inflation adjusted from about $900 a month to now about $1,500 a month.
Inflation adjusted.
Inflation adjusted. The age of a first-time home buyer in 2008 was 30 years old. It is now 38 years old. First-time home buyer. So when we have a picture of a first-time home buyer,
And that's scary.
you think of, kind of a toddler in one arm, a dog, you're trying to figure it out. 38 years old.
Yeah, shocking number. Like they really, when you talk about people living in the society they thought they lived in, right? If the average age of a first-time home buyer, goes north of 40, like that is really, and other first world countries have it even worse. Like the Canadians, their housing situation is even worse. So yeah, it is fascinating to hear. You've already heard Charlie Kirk announce that he has no solutions, because the solutions, what's obviously happening here is rich versus poor, and you will not hear Kirk nor Carlson express it in those terms. They will do everything they can to avoid it. You will hear, like, the boomers. There was a lot of hate on the boomer generation, so you'll hear like blaming other generations. But let's keep focused on rich versus poor here.
He suggested that he might have some solutions without using the socialism word, right? Isn't that what he said?
I think we can go back and play the tape again, but I think you won't hear any solutions from Kirk this whole podcast. So if he claimed to have any, he must have forgotten to mention them.
All right.
And he will also say things, he will repeatedly say during this clip that, well, I'll leave it for someone else to come in with the buffet line of solutions. I think that's the actual word he uses. So we'll tell, yeah. So,
anyway, I thought on the whole, it was a cathartic diagnosis of the situation. He actually spoke the truth about it. But yeah, a credit-based renting system is that what he said?
Yeah, we have a credit-centric, a rentier economy. It's amazing to see the old prophecies, the old classical economists, all sort of coming true in just the way. Obviously, we talk about on this podcast. The classical economists, your John Stuart Mills, your David Ricardos, your Adam Smiths, were very careful about earned versus unearned income, because they didn't want the feudal landlord stealing all of the proceeds of their factories and what have you.
Well, it's good to hear someone sort of address the issue in a somewhat mainstream way. So that's good
for me. And I remember 2016 voting for Bernie Sanders as a distress call, being like, rulers in Washington, I make $2,200 a month after taxes, and my student loan payments are $1,200 a month. I have to. I'm like, my 30s are wearing on here. I have to live with multiple roommates. It's either admit that my life is wasted, or we do something. Something has to give here. And then, of course, to see the Democrats cheat Bernie in 2016 cravenly, and again in 2020, meant that I can never vote for the Democrats again. So I'm out here voting for Jill Stein, the crazy cat lady, anything I can, anything but the Democrats. Highly relatable. It's nice to hear someone actually acknowledge the existence of this issue. Refreshing, to say the least. Huh? All right, well, let's roll on to clip number 2 here, Brian. In this one, we'll hear Messieurs Kirk and Carlson try to figure out what could be causing this issue.
What is causing this? Well, number one, I don't want to get too Ron Paul libertarian, but the Federal Reserve pumping in cheap money post-2008 has just been a catastrophe. We have spent too much money, borrowed too much money. We have deteriorated our currency. And the purchasing power every generation is getting weaker. So your dollar is actually going less and less as far as it has year over year. So then what is the consequence of this? So you have a generation that is renting a lot more than it's owning. So when you do not own something, why would you defend it? So so you find then political radicalization start to seep in, because an entire generation is getting routinely cynical year over year as their net worth either stays at zero or goes into negative. Now, my question for every Republican senator and congressman watching this, if you do not know these 4 letters, then you are not doing your job. BNPL. Do you know what that means?
No clue.
Buy now, pay later. Buy now, pay later is how 60%, according to surveys, of Generation Z is paying for things month to month. They're not credit cards. So this is not regulated by credit bureaus. It's not regulated with credit checks. It's basically anything from Amazon to Instacart, groceries, clothing, furniture. You can finance anything. It's BNPL. It's run by 3 main companies, Klarna, Affirm, and Afterpay. And essentially, you're 21, 22 years old. You can split a pizza into 4 payments. Sounds great, right? This is the modern tech economy.
Buy a pizza on credit?
Yes. It's
happening now?
You can go to Instacart right now, and either through Klarna, Affirm, or Afterpay. Those are the 3 big actors. These are non-credit regulated bureaus.
Shut those fuckers down tomorrow. No, I'm serious. I'm so offended.
Yeah, so there you go. You hear at the end there. So I think what we're going to want to do is play clip number 3 close on the heels of clip number 2 and then talk about them together. But I just appreciate here Charlie Kirk at the beginning was like, what's causing this? Well, I don't want to be too Ron Paulian, but it's the Federal Reserve and they're printing money. And then he moved on to buy now, pay later, right? As if like that. But we'll talk much more about that after the second clip. But it's interesting, the buy now, pay it later. Like, is that the cause of the problem, Charlie? Or is that a symptom of young people having no money because no older people will give them any money? Just play clip number 3. They'll try to figure out, in this one, they're going to talk about who is to blame for this crisis. Now, we haven't sufficiently talked about what's caused the crisis, so we do want to come back after clip number 3. But just keep it in your memory bank that Charlie Kirk blamed this on the Fed and the Federal Reserve and their profligate printing of money. So let's roll clip number 3.
We'll just have to say that if you're buying a pizza on a payment plan, that'd be like the height of damnation, man. Probably what lies in all our future. Oh, man.
I think that gets close to the original intended meaning of the word damnation. I think that really is close. Being in perpetual debt servitude is what people originally meant by that term, I reckon. Anyhow, let's roll clip number 3, and then we'll.
You can buy a pizza on credit. Someone needs.
So, but here's the kicker, and your groceries. The belief is that Gen Z is doing this to live above their means. Most are actually doing this to meet their means.
So that's the definition of predatory.
Right. And so again, this is not structurally healthy debt. So there's an argument for debt if you have a mortgage, because the whole system is kind of rigged towards mortgages.
Of course it is.
You could deduct the interest, the asset price goes up.
It's hard to get off the mortgage addiction. I did it, but
there's an argument for it.
You take your lumps if you don't have a mortgage.
And I think there's an argument that's actually an okay and
you could
reconcilable type of debt.
I know smart people have mortgages.
If you are in investment banking and you have student loan debt and that student loan certificate, that credential got you the investment bank, okay, you bet on yourself. Maybe that's justifiable. Again, I'm very anti-college, as you know. There's really no place where you can make an argument that financing your Whole Foods order is good for you.
But to do that to young people who really, I'm 56 and I'm still terrible with money. It's hard. And I don't think I'm not lazy and I don't think I'm profligate, but I also think I'm easily fooled because I'm distracted. And if I was 21, imagine how much more unsophisticated I would be and how much more vulnerable to predatory behavior like that. And everything is so easy because everything is digital now. That's an awful thing to do to young people.
Young people, yeah. A couple of these clips, the last word is kind of cut off because Charlie or Tucker would start talking over the other one. They're talking about this buy now, pay later as if it is a cause of the problem and not a symptom.
Well, I don't think they're saying it's the cause. Or they're saying it's predatory and like young people have no choice and that's why they're doing it. So they're not saying the cause is young people choosing the buy now, pay later.
Charlie Kirk brought it up as his second cause after Ron Paul's criticism of the Fed, but then you heard him say, well, they have no choice, So let's just talk about the causes. I just don't think we agree, and the only question here is, does Charlie Kirk agree also? And you're saying he does. Maybe you're right. But the issue here is what is really causing this issue? Well, okay, the great, the economy, the U.S. economy incubated in a situation where economic expansion was just a given, right? We had this huge Western frontier, mining and timber operations and farms and ranches just waiting to be set up. And so our system was born and evolved and matriculated in a circumstance of constant expansion. And so all of the tissue, the economic tissue of our society, everything about it is set up to, it's like the Roman Empire comes into town, conquers your city, subjugates your ruler, you become a vassal state, and now a percentage of all of the wealth your city state takes in, now you have to give it to the Romans as tribute. And so the way that this country was set up is in a banking system, and the banks become enfranchised in everyone's business because you got to go to the bank, take out a loan to set up your timber operation, your mining operation, your ranch, your farm, what have you. So what we have here is a pie, and the pie slices of the ruling class, the banks, are set to expand automatically according to the laws of compound interest at a set interest rate. And then the rest of us don't have that guarantee. So as long as the pie is the share of the banking class can grow over time, as long as their slice of the pie can enlarge, as long as the overall size of the pie is constantly enlarging. But when that's not the case, they have to take their money from the rest of us, right? Obviously, they're going to profit at the rest of our expense when the economy is not growing, right? So that makes sense, right? It kind of goes back to that blanket that doesn't quite cover the whole body. If the blanket doesn't expand while the body's expanding, then the blankets get hoarded by the rich. I don't know if I'm mixing too many metaphors there. But the tissue, the structure of society, right? The Federal Reserve is part of that structure. So is fractional reserve banking, and so is capitalism itself, right? So let's take them in order. Let's start with capitalism, right? Obviously, your boss cannot pay you the full value of your labor, right? Even if your boss was running a nonprofit, they have overhead, right? The owner of your company has electric bills and other things they've got to pay out of the revenue that you, the employee, generate for their company. So you're definitely getting paid some amount less than the actual value of your labor, right? Just because of overhead, and then there's the profit on top of that. And the worst conditions are in the labor market, right? When the table and chair, the cabinet maker, the furniture maker goes to buy wood, they requisition their lumber based on the prevailing price of lumber, right? Not on the value of lumber to that business. Your employer will often, when you're negotiating over your wages, talk about how much value you have to the company, but really their expense to that business input, your labor, is actually pegged to prevailing conditions in the labor market. And if the labor market can be made precarious enough, you can get people to agree voluntarily to work for some seriously low wages, right? With me so far here, Brian.
I started thinking about other things.
All right. Well, so the argument here is the counter argument is that all values of goods and services are based on what people are willing to pay for them, and that no matter what price you pay, if you voluntarily paid it, then you haven't been ripped off, right? There is no daylight, in other words, between value and price. Right? The value of something is always the price you pay for it. All right, that's a marginal value theory. That's what the Austrian school is famous for. And so their argument is, well, it's not, your employer is not paying you less than the value of your labor because you have entered into a voluntary contract with them. Okay? But of course, what does that analysis miss? Well, that analysis misses the point that Jeff Bezos' Amazon.com can be profitable at a whole bunch of different salaries for its employees. Right? There's a range of salaries that Jeff Bezos would theoretically be willing to pay, and it would still be profitable for him. And then obviously there'd be some salary that would no longer be profitable or worth it for Bezos to conduct his business. But if conditions in the labor market are so good and cushy that you don't really need to that you can demand a really high salary from Bezos, then you might say that Bezos is not getting ripped off, right? He's paying he's paying because he's voluntarily agreed to this contract. It can't be that he's getting ripped off, no matter how good things are, no matter how good conditions are in the labor market. So so we have this system this structure that systematically underpays employees, right? That is what are profits are wages that weren't paid out, right? That's one way to think of it. Like the profits of these companies are all unpaid wages. And that's the Marxian analysis of the situation. So you have just the way that business is structured means that people own the businesses like you would own a toll booth. Like you own the business. I'm thinking now of absentee owners, not your roll up the sleeves and work alongside your employees sorts of business owners. At a certain size, a scale, you end up with absentee owners whose only job is to collect mail checks out their mailbox. They have no idea how the factory works that they own. I'm thinking of I always think of the Walmart, the heirs to the Walmart fortune down there in Bentonville, Arkansas. Right, these people have no idea how to run a retail store. They wouldn't even know where to start. They just know that they own the business because they inherited it from their old man, Sam Walton, who set the whole apparatus up. So there's that. There's capitalism is systematically, taking advantage of labor market situations to systematically underpay people. And then, of course, we have the Fed. Charlie Kirk hit the nail on the head. The Fed is a ripoff too, right? We rent our money from rich people. We don't need to. We can make up as much money as we want. We can use sound currency. We can use modern monetary theory, currency, and just worry only about inflation. But we don't do either of those things. Right now, we have a system where we borrow from the rich. When we're sitting on a money printer, but yet for some reason we pay tolls to the rich here. So again, this is another toll booth situation, just like owning a business that you never visit. Right? You're just entitled. You're just entitled to the profits of the business, and just like, and then it's the same with the sale of treasury bonds to the already wealthy and to banking institutions, right? You're holding our money supply hostage and charging us for our own money supply, right? So you've got, and that obviously that causes the Federal Reserve runs the economy targeting a certain inflation rate to motivate people to invest their money in the stock market. And so you end up with a situation where your money is constantly worth less and less over time. So that's insidious. And of course, the people that get the money the Federal Reserve prints first don't feel the effects of inflation. So you have another mass transfer of wealth from poor to rich thanks to the Federal Reserve System. So 1, we got capitalism. 2, we got the Federal Reserve System. And 3 is fractional reserve lending. Any comments before I dive into number 3, Brian?
Well, all right. Well, I guess, obviously it's a keen observation that, companies have to underpay their employees based on the amount that they work. And the sector of the banking, of the economy is ever increasing. And it's not like a guarantee for the rest of the economy. I just don't know if we have to belabor these points though.
Because of the tissue of propaganda surrounding the way our economy really works. These are things that people often haven't thought of, and they're certainly not represented in the mainstream media. So I always like to give a little background, and each episode kind of has to stand on its own too. People aren't necessarily listening to every single episode, so I think that these are the most critical points you could possibly belabor. So number 3, of course, is fractional reserve lending, where you're a bank. Right? We've all seen It's a Wonderful Life, with our man Jimmy Stewart, and they have a bank run. Right. The issue is that when you put $100 in the bank and the bank turns around and loans that to me, they don't draw your account down $100. So you have a $50 balance or a $0 balance, right? They give me a loan of your $100 and leave your account at $200. So now my credit card approves for $100 and your debit card approves for $100. So your original $100 now becomes $200 that could potentially be spent in the economy. So that is how fractional reserve lending works. And this also creates a transfer of wealth from poor to rich, because the banks, essentially what they're doing here is they're conjuring money out of thin air and then loaning it to you. When you go to the bank and take out a mortgage or a business loan, essentially the bank is charging you for access to your future money. And it's like they have this Stargazer, this time portal. They can bring your money from the future and deliver it to you because money's fungible, right? It's like if I owe you $5 and you owe someone else $5, well, I could just be said that I owe that third party $5 because the money's fungible, and you can just excuse yourself from the transaction's equivalent. You know, the net here is that I owe $5 and this third party is owed $5. So because of that fungible money, the banks transport your money from the future into the present, and they charge you a price for it, right? And so what happens is all the dollars of tomorrow and the next day have already been brought from the future into the present, except for some of those debts are going to turn out to be bad debts, right? So some of those dollars are going to be turned out to be invalid, right? There's a risk to lending, and the risk is that the lendee might not pay back the lender. Like the person that borrowed the money might, die, or their business might fail, or they might lose their job and not be able to pay their mortgage, whatever the thing. And so, it matches the economic expansion simile with the pies here, because when you've got all this money from the future flooding into the present, except for some of those dollars are going to turn out to not really be there when we get to the future, we're also racking up debts. The trick here is that the bank is charging you for access to your future money. And so tomorrow the bank has a claim, right? We have collectively promised the bank a greater and greater percentage of our overall money supply each passing year. And so with each year, the corner we've painted ourselves into becomes smaller. The drum is tighter with each passing year because we've made all these voluntary promises to the banks for more and more of our overall share of our currency. And the only way to keep the economy going in the near term is to borrow more future money to pay the banks today. But that, of course, just gives the banks a greater claim on their share, a greater share of tomorrow's wealth. So that's why the Bible famously calls for the periodic debt forgiveness, is because the way that compound interest works tends to throw the economy into disarray. So that is the framework here, which I am listening to this conversation, and it's fascinating to hear conservatives whose job it is to defend the current system. They're having to defend this systematic and continuous transfer of wealth from poor to rich that gets worse over time. Like the magnitude of it has to get worse over time. So I suppose after that long-winded explanation, Brian, if we could go on to clip number 4 and hear how Tucker Carlson, as a conservative, is taking all this on board.
You know what I don't like about conservatives, and I am one, is that it would never occur to some of them that there are two sides to the story. It's like immediately, they blame the people who are, buying Coachella tickets on credit, which I get. You shouldn't buy Coachella tickets on credit, or your pizza or your Whole Foods order. I totally agree with that. That's stupid. But it doesn't occur to them that there's another side, that the people loaning the money are taking advantage of the dumb people borrowing the money. That both are culpable. And by the way, I think the people with more power and more wisdom are probably more culpable, act morally, than the people who are. In other words, are we matter at the drug user or the drug dealer?
Well, and then also,
typically the dealer, but conservatives look at all economic arrangements and they never blame the dealer. And I don't know what that is. How about we'll blame everybody? It's bad.
I think the reason, and it's a tick within the conservative movement, is that all of a sudden we're Marxists if we do that. And I think that no, I'm not saying, I don't believe that.
No, but you're absolutely right.
I think
I'm a racist if I don't like mass immigration. Well, I don't like mass immigration, but I'm not a racist. I don't like this, and I'm not a Marxist.
Right, exactly.
It's just name calling to stop you from raising the question.
It's thought terminating cliches. Is what it is.
So good.
Right? It's stop thinking it. Because we're going to terminate your thought by calling you a Marxist or whatever. And do I think this should be illegal? I don't know. Probably. I need to learn more about it. All I'm saying is I am here as a messenger of the next generation. I'm telling you, this is bad. This generation can't own anything. They owe so much more money than generations prior. This is the most indebted generation in history. And I double checked that. Gen Z owes the most money in any history, any generation in history. So we wonder why then all of a sudden, hey, you want to go buy a home now at the age of 38, your credit score is destroyed. Your spending habits are terrible. You don't want to save and you don't think you should save. And you know what I hear from some of them is they say, well, why should I save when what I saw around me is that you need to get into this economy and spend because the savers got wrecked in 2008. Again, that's an oversimplification, but there is economic nihilism that is set in to a lot of this next generation where they're not participating in any of the upside right now, any of the upside of the last 5 years. In fact, they're only seeing the downside. They're seeing their apartments get smaller, their rents go up, their groceries get more expensive.
Yeah, well, the way that we normally structure debt in this in our society is that the lender is supposed to be taking on the risk, and we put the lender is supposed to be checking standards. The lender is the one that's supposed to be, the lender's the one that's supposed to fill out the paperwork. The lender's the one, who presumably takes the risk. But it's interesting to note that in 2008, as Kirk noted there, that in 2008, the people that the lenders all got bailed out, the lendees were all bailed out, while the lenders were just foreclosed upon. So yeah, it's interesting. 2008 definitely was. I think we've said it on this pod many a time, Brian, but I think that is the date that future civilizations historians will look back on and circle as the date of the end of the American Empire. Certainly will be a auspicious year on that front. And then the other thing is you hear them like, well, we're not socialists, but we can't help but notice that one group has stolen all of the other group's money. What could the solution? How would we ever correct a situation like that? Their minds just can't seem to come up with one, but we'll let them carry on here. Any reactions to that clip, Brian, before we roll into number 5?
Well, what's interesting is to hear them struggle the mental gymnastics of dealing with, Marxian issues, and they're trying to dance around it.
To them, being called a Marxist is the same as being called a racist. Did you hear Tucker make that comparison? That is a thought-terminating cliche. It's like, no, Marxist does not mean the same thing as racist. Marxist means a certain way of looking at the economy, a certain analysis of looking at the economy. And ironically, it's that analysis it's a lack of that analysis that's causing Tucker and Kirk to have no idea what the solution could be to this problem. So that's really, it's really wild. To them, Marxist is just a slur, but to me, it's like a totally legitimate way of thinking. Unlike racism. But anyway, let's see what they have to say in clip number 5 here, Brian.
Donald Trump built this movement of younger voters that galvanized the nation. Again, this is the untold story of the 2024 election, is how Donald Trump won the youth vote in so many parts of the country. Okay, so what are they experiencing? They own nothing. They're renting constantly. And they're involved in this scam of a credit-based economy. Everything is based on credit. And so then what it does is it deteriorates your capacity to have equity. And so, again, I'm not here to propose a solution of all these different policy requirements. All I'm saying is, how about some national attention for this? How about
there's going to be
we have a conversation about it?
There's going to be a policy solution imposed on the rest of us, which is just stealing your stuff.
Well, that's the thing. So that's what this is where the continuum, whatever you want to call it, the spectrum, whatever DC term, we're here in kind of, again, I am a market guy. I like private property.
I agree.
I like trading. I like when I meet someone good at their craft and they're a carpenter or they're a small business owner. I actually want to save markets. And if we don't do something about this, you're going to get a Venezuelan-style youth-led revolt.
Exactly right.
And I am not exaggerating.
Yeah, I agree with these guys here. It is when you give young people like no chance to move forward, and then you're looking at a serious situation, like your serious political situation. Just one thing that comes to mind listening to that clip there is the great capitalist prophecy. Is that the technology will enable. This is the Marxian prophecy that technology will enable capitalists to fire all their workforces en masse, and then they will be much more profitable than they were when they had to pay employees, except for the other shoe drops when now no one can afford to buy the products on offer in the market because all the employees have been fired en masse. Another way of saying it is that when capitalists fire their employees and replace them with technology, they're really eradicating the market for each other's products while they're doing it, right? The thing that they don't really. So how do you keep a capitalist economy running when you have already relieved the working and middle classes of all their wealth? Well, credit is the only solution, right? That's how people can continue to buy goods and services, even though their bosses are chronically underpaying them, and the banking system is making off with all of their wealth in a systematic fashion. So yeah, interesting. And it's just, man, again, it's wild to hear these guys grapple with the obvious issue that one small group has absconded with all the money from a much larger group. How do we fix that situation without becoming Marxist? It's terrible conundrum right there.
Well, so are you for Venezuelan uprising or against it?
Well, the Venezuelan uprising in some ways went well and in other ways went terribly. Well, what I would think in the near term, what we need to do is correct the tax code, start hammering unearned income, to borrow the parlance of the classical economists, with taxes. Essentially, what we need to do is reset the water cycle. Obviously rainwater falls over the mountains and that turns into streams and brooks that coagulates into rivers, and then rivers become lakes, and lakes flow into the even bigger rivers, and then those bigger rivers flow into the ocean, and then that water's evaporated into clouds over the ocean, drifts over the mountains, and falls again as rain. There's a virtuous cycle there, and we need to restore the economic flow just to give our plane more runway to take off here, because we're taxing towards a cliff. If we remove wealth from where it's pooling up uselessly in the economy and reseed it, reintroduce it where it is sorely needed, we can keep the capitalist economy running for at least a few more decades while we figure out how to order an economy that doesn't systematically rob the lower classes.
Well, I think the people in charge should be trying to avoid a Venezuelan revolution. I guess I don't really know the particulars of it. There was a lot of stories of really expensive toilet paper, I think.
Yeah.
Or was that COVID? Or both?
Both. The Hugo Chavez revolt, it's hard to know because we hammered them with sanctions too. And also in 2003, I think it was 2003 when Chavez first got elected, but then the CIA took him out in a coup. And then people took him to the streets and reinstalled Hugo Chavez after the CIA coup. So it's like, all right, well, how did the Venezuelan revolution go bad because it was rotten and unorganized, or did it go bad because of outside pressure? Because the American military and the American intelligence agencies, as so often happens, have to come in and just demolish any hint of socialism, any hint of Marxism, any hint of a communist takeover of their fruit plantations or what have you. So I guess I don't really know either. I would have to really do a deep dive into Venezuelan history to determine whether or not their revolution is any kind of a model for us to follow here. But I don't know. That would be. But I think in the near term, it's Bernie Sanders-esque policies of. It's like, remember that Wallace and Gromit train chase scene where Wallace and Gromit are chasing the penguin on a model train, and the train runs out of tracks, and so Gromit the dog is frantically throwing new track down in front of the train as it speeds along. Right, that's what we need to be doing to avoid a total catastrophe. So anyway, that's what I think. Should we migrate on to number 6 here, Brian?
Sure.
One of the reasons they voted for Trump is they said, President Trump, please reorder this economy for us because it's severely disordered. And so the Republican Party currently is focused on a lot of stuff. I get it. You have a lot of constituencies to serve. But we have participated, we being the body politic, the last 20 years, especially the last 10, in a concerted effort of intergenerational theft. And if you don't care, Mamdani is just the beginning.
So someone, in the next 10 years is going to shut it down because the public doesn't want this at all. They don't want...
Shut what down?
Shut down just the parasite economy. Because it's going to get shut down. And everyone participating in it knows that. They're trying to steal as much as they can before it gets shut down. So the question is it shut down by Teddy Roosevelt or is it shut down by Hugo Chavez?
By Hugo Chavez was the last couple of words there. And reorder the economy. Well, I don't think that Donald has any intention of reordering the economy. But it's interesting to hear. Kirk is like a Trump loyalist, so he has to come out and make it seem like the Donald's going to help with this problem. And he also is an evangelical, as we'll hear, at the end of the 10th clip. And he can see the problem. He goes to the college campuses. It's clear to him what's going on. But his public advocacy has to stop short of solutions, and it has to pretend that the Donald has his finger anywhere near the pulse of this horrific economic problem that's looming. So it's interesting to hear the poor guy. He's a fish out of water. And clearly, the solution here is not conservative politics. And of course, speaking of conservative politics, in this next clip, we're going to hear about how this originated with Reagan, which is another interesting thing to hear conservatives opining on.
There was this anti-Soviet, anti-communist, anti-Marxist belief that was, kind of the connective tissue of what was Reagan's rise in the 80s. And therefore, again, we exist on these ridiculous binaries at times, which is fine. Some things are binary, like sex is binary, male, female. Other things are not, which is there's a lot of steps in between like anarcho-capitalism and like oligarchy-run capitalism, which is what we have right now. We have oligarchy-run capitalism and Marxism. Like, there's a lot of steps on the continuum,
right,
from oligarchy-run capitalism to that. And so, but also, if you look at the tax code, if you look at the whole configuration of the current system, which again, credit to President Trump for finally putting a working class tax cut, no tax on tips and no tax on overtime. Finally, workers get something. But the whole configuration of the tax code is really rigged towards the big incumbent actors and the top 1% or the Pareto principle. I know I sound like a left-wing Elizabeth Warren person.
Who cares?
I don't care.
You've described the problem. It needs a remedy.
But here again, let me just kind of complete. The problem should not be how are we going to get the 1% to flourish. We shouldn't penalize them.
I agree.
The question should be, how do we get the bottom 50% to have a little bit better life and their kids to have a much better life and their grandkids to have an even better life than that? That's the American project, is intergenerational wealth building, is that you're going to sacrifice a little bit, your kids will be better off. And this is the kicker. Why is it that these students are showing up in massive numbers to my events? Why do they vote for Trump? This is a fact. It is the first time since George Washington that this generation has it worse off than their parents at the same age. It has not happened, not even during the Great Depression. It's about the same. This generation is significantly worse off. And the problem, this is what no one mentions. We're not poorer. So you look at all these problems, you would think, like, if you're from Mars and you're like looking at all these numbers, you would think that the country's gone through like an economic tailspin the last 15 years. Like, okay, your young people can't afford homes and they're putting groceries on credit and they're killing themselves and they're socially isolated and they're addicted to benzodiazepines and Zoloft. It's obvious you guys went through like a terrible economic catastrophe.
Right.
Like
you lost a war, yeah.
No, the stock market's at record highs. Our companies are more valuable than ever. So wait, we've solved the tough stuff. We know how to create wealth, but we don't know how to create it for the generation that needs it most. If you look at the economic conditions, you would think the other conditions surrounding it are like abject poverty. These are the problems that like third world nations have.
I know.
Our young people can't afford stuff and they have to finance their basic necessities. And yet we're the wealthiest nation in the history of the world on the planet. We have a $37 trillion GDP. We have the greatest companies and we have all this stuff to brag about. And yet all of our problems would beg the question, and it's like this inherent contradiction. We're super wealthy on one side, like a powerhouse juggernaut, and we are like an economic nightmare on the other side. How did that happen? Answer: the wealth went to older people at the expense of the next generation.
That's for sure.
Every single economic growth decision of the last 30 years has been made. I am going to benefit. My baby boomer generation is going to benefit, and I don't care if it hurts young.
Okay, here we go. When people have ideas about how you should blame people who are not the rich for the fact that all of our money is missing, right? When they have ideas about how you should blame racial minorities, immigrants, or in this case, the boomers, right? You really got to stop and say, well, it's not the olds that have stolen our money. It is the rich that have stolen our money. And I noticed Charlie there was very clear that there's a whole spectrum between like Stalin on the one hand and oligarchy-run capitalism on the other hand. He said this is non-binary. We're not dealing with binaries here. But we really are dealing with binaries. Either we are going to manage to return enough wealth to the poors so that they continue to have babies and make workers for the next generation of the vibrant economy, or we're not going to do that and we're going to face mass economic disruption instead. And so whatever solution you propose, it has to somehow round up wealth from the wealthy where it is pooling uselessly and reseed it where it's desperately needed among the working and middle classes. And of course, Reaganism is just these guys are suggesting fixing the tax code. The tax code's another one of these things that systematically redistributes wealth from the poor to the rich because the rich have excused themselves from all manner of taxes. As Warren Buffett's famous comment that his secretary pays a higher tax rate than he does. It's the 15% tax rate on capital gains versus the 40% tax rate you end up paying for Medicare, your state and your local, your state and your federal taxes. But it's interesting to hear these guys kind of flirt with the idea of returning to the pre-Reagan tax brackets, which I think the highest one was like 79% in 1980, and and it was like down to like 29% by 1988, something crazy like that. So yeah, I mean, returning to the pre-Reagan tax, rejecting neoliberal trickle-down economics where we just give the wealthy people a bunch of money and pretend it's going to trickle down to the poor. Obviously, that turned out to be a fail. But the institutional redistribution of wealth from poor to rich is carrying on in many other magisteria beyond the tax code. We talked about central banking, fractional reserve banking, and the structure of capitalism itself. It all is factors that systematically redistribute wealth from poor to rich. And the tax code is just another example, but still fascinating to hear conservatives of these two guys' caliber kind of flirting with that idea of going back to pre-Reagan tax codes. It seems like the rejection of neoliberalism is happening even on the right, which is interesting to hear.
Well, I think that blaming boomers is a funny business, to some extent, I suppose they have culpability for doing what's in their self-interest. But on the other hand, it's hard to imagine that, everyone does what's in their self-interest, so we're not really blaming them for anything that, I feel like people today wouldn't do. I guess they could have gone out in the streets and been up in arms when, like, Ronald Reagan got elected and tried to put through these tax cuts and whatnot, but they did not. It's hard to imagine people doing that today if somehow they were promised money at the expense of future generations. Like, what would they? What would we do?
I don't think that's exactly how I don't think that there was like an explicit promise of here, just vote for this, we'll get you money, we'll screw the next couple of generations. I think that I don't think that's what the boomers are guilty of, in my view, is the World War II generation told them not to read any Karl Marx books. They said, I guess we don't have to crack that Karl Marx book. It's like the devil's Bible. No reason to look in there. You just heard Tucker saying it's like a slur to be called a Marxist. So that they were born into the greatest economic conditions history has ever seen, and so of course, why would they read a Karl Marx book? It probably seemed pretty obvious that the people that were running their parents, who were running this an economy that was the envy of the world, and they are saying don't read this other book. I can just see why you would say, okay, I guess there's no need to, there's no teaser or tickler or alarm bell to have you say, wait a second, maybe we should start looking into this book. Wild stuff here. All right, well, let's go on to number 8 here, Brian.
Is someone going to finally have to be on the hook for the amount of student loan debt this generation has? Can we seize and raid the endowments? These colleges are hedge funds with schools attached.
Exactly.
They're growing their endowments by hundreds % and their enrollment by like 3 to 4%. So their endowment is exploding and their enrollments are barely exploding, not to mention all the other problems embedded there.
It's the medieval church. It needs reform.
Yeah, and so I'm not here presenting all the solutions. Smarter people than me can kind of come through with a buffet line of solutions. My biggest contention is, why is no one even admitting this is a problem?
Right.
And that's what's so bizarre.
What is that? So we began on that question. I don't know the answer. What's your guess?
And again, I'm not doing one of those things where I ask the question not rhetorically. I have guesses. The first of which is that it's so bad they're just ignoring it. And
right.
I really think that's part of it, which is that Congress is so filled with septuagenarians and octogenarians that it's so distant from their purview. They're way too concerned to send more money to Ukraine or whatever their primary priority is, that kind of representing the next generation, like, oh, those kids will kind of sort their way out. We had it tough too, which they didn't compared to what this generation has to go through. But secondly, I also think that the left will eventually wake up to this. I'm telling you. They're all a mess right now. They don't know which way they're going. But the Mamdani thing is a little bit of a trial balloon. They're like, wow, that's interesting. It's getting younger people interested and involved. And just remember, like, Bernie Sanders won the Democrat primary in 2016, and he won it in 2020 if it wasn't for the COVID lockdown. The base of the Democrat Party has been yelling about economic anxiety for 10 years before it was even nearly as bad as it is today.
You're right.
And so what we as conservatives need to be really concerned about, a cautionary tale, is a Democrat candidate or politician that says everything I've just said, that runs on basically resentment and bitter-driven politics. You own nothing because of these people. Let's go take it. And that's a little bit more sane on the trans stuff, the crime stuff, and the border stuff.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, they said it. We have this odd thing in America where we don't talk about the class war. No class analysis. No reason to read any Marx books. So yeah, that's really, really interesting. And the other bit here is the Democrats, right? Obviously, it just is so obvious that the Democrats are the useful opposition, right? They have the same donors as the Republicans, so their job is to get us to not talk about the class war also, right? So their job is to be complicit in this massive redistribution of wealth from poor to rich, and that's why they denied Bernie Sanders in 16 and 20, and why they continue to float wholly unelectable candidates to this day. And speaking of the Democrats, clip number 9 is also about the Dems.
There's a lot at stake here. This is running the world, okay? So you don't just decide trans rights are central to your platform by accident. There's smart people thinking about this, and I've always wondered, was that a way to tame economic populism? Is the thing that the donors on both sides fear the most by far. They need a little bit of it in order to stop the revolution from coming, as you have said. You need a Teddy Roosevelt, actually.
Everybody needs it.
They're too greedy and stupid to realize that.
Short-sighted.
Exactly. So, but I always have wondered, what was the trans thing? Why, if I'm running the Democratic Party, I'm a huge donor of the party. I may, like the trans thing or whatever, but I don't want to put that at the center of my platform because that's going to turn off all the normal people. I'm going to lose with that. It's too bonkers. Maybe that was inserted into the dialogue on the left to really kind of stop the Sanders insurrection forever.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Or am I being too...
No, I always...
Because Sanders is what they feared most.
Sanders would have given any candidate, including Trump, more of a run for his money in 2016. I think Trump would have beat Sanders, but Sanders would have campaigned in Michigan.
Oh, big time.
Sanders would have campaigned in Wisconsin.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a lot of crossover of Bernie Sanders Trump voters. That exists, right?
Sanders is a fraud or whatever you think of Bernie Sanders. Yes. A total fraud. However, a sincere Sanders, I think, would be unstoppable. Yeah.
I'm less interested in the biography or the person of where the Democrat Party is going.
I agree.
I'm much more interested in the movement that obviously is coming next.
Yeah. Yep. There you have it. The Dems could totally win these elections if they just embraced economic populism, but they suspiciously do not, eh?
Well, obviously they want to avoid that like the plague.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's about all I have for that clip. But let's move on to clip number 10, which is about the debt jubilees.
One of the 613 laws of Judaism, and one of the more beautiful teachings, is called the Year of Jubilee, which is every 50 years is debt abolition and basically the rectifying of your financial situation for the nation of Israel. It was in law every 50 years.
Because the religion recognized, I think as all religions do, that debt is slavery.
Well, it says that in Proverbs 7:22, where it says basically, if you borrow money, you are a slave to the lender.
Of course.
Repeated all throughout the Torah, all throughout the Old and New Testament. And so now here we are in a modern context. Again, a little bit of debt is justifiable, mortgage, maybe, but another one that we haven't even touched on that is crushing people, Democrats are starting to talk about this more, is medical debt. Oh, it is crushing people. They go to the ER for just, a broken leg and they have a $7,000 bill and they are just murdered by those bills for the rest of their life. And so you have medical debt, you have credit card debt, you have personal debt, you have student loan debt.
Yeah. The debt jubilees. It's fascinating to me. We already talked about how Charlie Kirk is a evangelical, totally aware of the debt jubilees, is a supporter of the Donald, and as a hardcore conservative, it's got to be tough for this man to come out there, acknowledge this economic problem, and have virtually nothing in the way of solutions. I think I did hear him say in one of those clips, Brian, that maybe we should punish the universities and claw back their endowments, but that's not going to fix the problem of generational wealth we're confronted with. The real solution here is, well, the brilliance of Dr. Michael Hudson's analysis is that the Roman Empire was this historical experiment in not forgive. What happens if we don't forgive debts every 50 years? What happens? Well, you build up a huge pile of wealth, but then, like Icarus, whose waxen wings bore him too close to the sun, you crash back down to Earth in a catastrophe that's proportional to the size of the wealth hoard you've built up. And that's exactly what we're looking at here. And it's like the Roman oligarchy just couldn't be asked to share their wealth with the middle and working classes. They hosed them at every opportunity. And that's what we're doing today. We're repeating the same mistakes the Roman Empire made. And so it's interesting to hear about the ministry of Jesus coming about in the Roman Empire, suggesting debt forgiveness as the problem, as the solution to the problems that were plaguing the Roman Empire in his day. Of course, it'd be a couple hundred years later, you'd get St. Augustine in North Africa changing the ministry of Jesus to mean forgiveness from sin instead of from debt. But going all the way back to the earliest days of the agricultural revolution, obviously, the Mesopotamians, the Babylonian kings, would periodically wipe out the debts, just like Charlie Kirk was talking about, to make sure that no one grew so rich that they could challenge the king's lineages for power, and to make sure that that there were still labor available to serve in the king's army and to dig the irrigation ditches, the corvée labor needed for irrigation ditches. And the Jews found out about this during the episode of the Babylonian captivity in the 6th century BC, when the Neo-Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar laid siege to and captured Jerusalem and destroyed the Temple of Solomon and carried the Jewish people back to Babylon with him as slaves. But then, of course, the Neo-Babylonians were themselves conquered by Darius and the Persians, who came into town and set Nehemiah and the rest of the Jews free back to Jerusalem, where they built the Second Temple and began to compile Judaism in the sense that we might recognize it today. And when they did, they baked in that Babylonian technology of periodic debt forgiveness into the Old Testament, where Jesus references it explicitly in the New Testament. That is the real solution to this problem. You're going to have to not necessarily confiscate the wealth that all the wealthy people have today, but we're going to have to cancel the we've all collectively, through voluntary contracts, quote unquote voluntary contracts, we've all collectively agreed to promise the bankers all of our future money. And we can't grow our economy infinitely to accommodate those promises. So we're going to have some of these debts aren't getting paid. The question is, are we going to have an orderly transition or an orderly non-payment of debts, or a chaotic one? Like they're saying, is it going to be more like Theodore Roosevelt or more like Hugo Chavez? So you can see why this particular podcast was like red meat to the lions, eh, Brian? I was wicked excited to hear these two conservative lads going on about the horrible problem of the class war. Very refreshing. I think that's what the word you put it at the beginning.
Wicked indeed.
Yeah. All right. Well, any more closing comments there, Brian? I think I have spent my shot here. I think I managed to get through all of the points I wanted to get to with respect to this exciting podcast. How about you?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, I will exhort you all to visit us over at systemfailure.org. There you can read the weekly essays on economic history written by yours truly. You can also get in touch with either Brian or myself by clicking on our respective names on the About page at systemfailure.org. Alrighty, folks, we'll be back next week with another exciting edition of the System Failure Podcast. Have a great week.
All right, see ya.